Fate, the Future, and Prophecy. Yeah, I'm Nim without the E, back again in a Boruto video as usual. And for the next roughly 8 minutes, there is something quite very interesting, especially about fate, the future, and also prophecy. There's not much I ask from you, but please, I'd be very happy if you could help me fix the algorithm by liking this video. And once again, thank you guys. Speaking of something uncertain like fate, the future, or even prophecy, honestly, this is something very complex, especially in the Boruto 2 Blue Vortex series. Because, of course, in the Naruto series, we were already introduced to a concept very familiar with what is called fate, the future or prophecy. But, you know, in the Naruto series, a prophecy and fate were linear, not as complicated or as complex as this. I don't know, from several aspects, and even things that shouldn't even be known, sometimes those become triggers that make the future branch off. I know this is complicated, but it seems like there is a difference between destiny and the future for Boruto himself. And I admit that connecting Boruto with Shibai or something like that, maybe this isn't the first time you've heard it, right? But one thing that I think needs to be considered is this. Fate has already been determined by the gods, but Boruto cannot control it. But on the other hand, Boruto's future is actually determined by his own choices. In other words, even though Boruto's fate has already been determined, just like what Jura once said in Chapter 4, where he mentioned that Boruto cannot escape his destiny, in reality, Boruto still has a chance to change it. Because after Chapter 25 was released, we could already begin to conclude that there is a difference between fate and the future itself. And at first, too, Toneri Otsutsuki, as a character who only appeared in the Boruto anime and for some reason never appeared in the manga at all, Toneri carried a speculation and theory made by the fandom. Yep, a prophecy about the eye that carries hope. In short, Toneri mentioned that Boruto's eye is the star of hope for the future, and Boruto has a task or responsibility, indirectly, to shoulder the fate of this world from destruction. Maybe if we draw at least a small conclusion, what exactly is meant by shoulder the fate of this world? I mean, what is the true meaning of shouldering or carrying the concept of this world's fate? Or does Ikamoto want to create Boruto in a version that is harsher than his father? I mean, everything is in Boruto's own hands. If Boruto gives up, then this world will be destroyed. But on the contrary, if Boruto doesn't give up, then planet Earth can continue to survive. And in other words, too, the fate of the world being shouldered by Boruto turns out to be the fate where Boruto's world will be destroyed, whether it's by the Otsutsuki or by the tree men themselves. And we also know that saying Boruto's fate has already been determined, like Jura or even the gods said, means that someone cannot control it. For example, Boruto has already been fated to lose everything. Yep, this prophecy from Momoshiki is Boruto's fate itself. He cannot change this fate. Even avoiding it is something impossible. Then, the question is, will this fate continue? I mean, or can this fate end and will a new fate appear, which clearly will end the same way, like Boruto losing everything? Yeah, a fate that cannot be avoided. Actually, even though fate is something absolute, throughout the Boruto series, there are several fates that could be changed. I know maybe this is minor, but at least this is not something coincidental. And this is about Himawari. If we go back to Chapter 7 of Boruto Next Generations, Momoshiki saw Kurama's fate where he would not be able to give or pass down his power to the next generation. And apparently sooner or later, that fate was proven. When Naruto fought against Ishiki and Kurama allowed Naruto to use Baryon mode to defeat Ishiki, this was the end of everything at that time, because the side effect of that mode's power made Kurama have to disappear for a while. And we also know that as an entity like Kurama, they would only be reborn after several hundred or even thousands of years. However, something very unique and never imagined happened. It turns out Kurama was actually reborn very quickly and instead resided in Himawari's body. So what actually happened? Based on this case and phenomenon, this is a refutation or denial that fate was successfully broken. Outside of the narrative that this depends on the author's will, the reason is that Naruto's descendants have the power of hope. But it's not only about Boruto. That power of hope was also born inside Himawari's body. And yeah, this has been proven directly through Kurama's reincarnation, which we never expected would happen this quickly. Then, if we return to the point about Boruto and fate, especially what Toneri said, there is another clue that will show that there is a process or sacrifice that must be paid. Your eyes will guide you to the light that will erase the darkness. And believe it or not, from the narrative of guiding, and of course from the light that erases darkness, this is not a coincidence, but rather something big. Maybe it sounds exaggerated, but actually that's how it is. And because this is the power of hope cannot just appear instantly. In other words, it usually emerges through a difficult path. For example, in the Naruto series, Jiraiya is the absolute example. With Jiraiya's existence, the prophecy once told by Gamamaru to Hagoromo in the past would soon happen. Gamamaru once told Hagoromo that he saw in his dream a blue-eyed child who would befriend all the Biju. And eventually Gamamaru found the teacher who would guide that blue-eyed child. Now, guiding here doesn't mean that after Jiraiya found his student, that guided student would immediately save the world. It took years, and of course, such a painful process, right? And after that, his student succeeded in saving the world. Now, if we assume from those two similarities, then it really makes sense if we connect it to the Jōgan, but more towards the Jōgan not being that easy to save Boruto. I mean, it will take time to be able to guide Boruto. In the end, the core of all this converges into one red line. Fate, the future, and prophecy are just three sides of the same coin, but the subtle differences between them actually determine the direction of Boruto's story. Fate has indeed been set. Boruto is destined to lose everything, as Momoshiki prophesied, and that is a burden he cannot avoid. However, the future is something born of choices, decisions, and sacrifices. As long as Boruto still has hope, there is still room to change the final result, even though the path he must take is full of suffering. The example of Himawari and Kurama is the clearest proof that even something considered absolute can be diverted. Kurama should have disappeared for thousands of years, but was reborn quickly through Himawari's body, a true anomaly that could only happen because of the power of hope. This hope is the antithesis of fate, and this is what may make Boruto the center of change. When Toneri said that Boruto's eyes are the star of hope that will guide toward the light, that is not just a prophecy, but a huge clue. Just like Jiraiya once guided Naruto toward his destiny, the Jōgan will function as a compass that guides Boruto through the darkness. So the absolute conclusion is, fate indeed cannot be denied, but the future can always be challenged. And Boruto, with the Jōgan and the power of hope he inherited, is the only one capable of shouldering the burden of the world to divert fate toward a new direction that is guaranteed to end with a perfect ending. Aside from a final conclusion, what do you guys think? Other than the fate that states Boruto will lose everything, as Momoshiki said, could there be another fate that ends the same way that Boruto cannot avoid, like the death of the most precious person? Because if Boruto's fate is to lose everything has already been proven, will losing his precious person also become part of Boruto's fate itself? But who is that person? But yeah, whatever your opinions are, let's discuss in the comments. Thank you for watching, like and subs. I'm Nim without the E. See you in the next video. Bye bye, Data Bio.